The re-education camps are coming. That is the message that is being sent, that is being trial ballooned by Hillary Clinton this morning on, I believe it was CNN. Mrs. Clinton, I'm trying to think, what was the word used to describe her by Fox News' Dana Perino? The amazing Secretary Hillary Clinton? Yes, she was on CNN giving an exclusive interview, not to Dana Perino of Fox News, who introduced her and fawned over her so much. No, it was to some no-name. And she was telling this no-name all about how, you see, even once Trump is gone, the real problem are the Trumpists, the MAGA cultists, as she called them. These are people who made the very, very bad decision of voting for Donald Trump. And some of them even plan on making the same ridiculous decision of voting for Donald Trump again. And this is very, very bad, as we all know, because a vote for Trump is a vote against democracy. Voting at this time in American history is the greatest threat to our democracy in perhaps our entire history. And so that's why Hillary is insisting on the formal deprogramming of Trump supporters in a manner which has not been detailed yet. She has not released a formal policy statement or position paper. She does not have the logistics worked out, but it is a problem that she is raising, and it is the beginnings of a solution that she is proposing. Now, I fully expect the think tank industry to expand upon this idea. Hillary is out as the front woman right now. She's taking the brunt of this, and once she starts fighting for this idea and starts getting it out in the mainstream where people are talking about it, then you'll start seeing articles about it in places like Salon or Slate, perhaps even Vox.com, with just spitballing ideas on how you would deprogram the MAGA cultists, perhaps through segregated or like solitary reform sessions, perhaps involving rat cages placed over their head. Maybe you could sit them down in front of a screen where they have to listen to Hillary Clinton give speeches in front of bankers and Arab oil sheikhs for 6 hours with some sort of device to hold their eyelids open and to hold their faces square so that they can look directly at the screen, and of course an attendant at all times to use a dropper to wet their eyes so that they don't dry out from being held open forcibly. Perhaps we could even make all of the MAGA cultists shave their heads, identify them only as numbers, and give them all the same plain white jumpsuits, and give them jobs based on an aptitude test, which they would carry out in a subterranean complex composed of white corridors and chambers, all with no windows or access to outside information. These are just a few of the ideas of what we could do with the MAGA cultists once the dear leader Hillary Clinton has been restored to her rightful place as the supreme leader of our democracy. Now, the idea, I think, just a few years ago, certainly way back in 2015, the idea that the former Democratic presidential nominee, someone who was a hop, skip, and a jump away from becoming the president of the United States, would be calling for the voters of the opposition to be put through re-education, through a formal process, re-education camps in all but name. I think that would have seemed simply fantastic just a few years ago, but these days it barely gets any traction as a headline, because it's just something that does not surprise people. It's not shocking. And the fact that it is no longer a shocking headline is proof positive that it is possible. That this is something that they not only want, but is achievable. It's just a matter of In what way and in what timeline or time frame? More like, I'm not proposing this multiple timeline theory of re-education camps. I don't want people to think that re-education camps are something that Hillary would have carried out in an alternate universe. I'm talking about what Hillary and her ilk would like to carry out in our current timeline, in the future. And to emphasize this, I would like to repeat a statement that I've made many times on this channel in the past. And that is, these people want you dead, and they think it's funny. But they will settle for your enslavement. If you happen to speak out, though, against your masters, and you have to be struck down in the streets, perhaps just shot out on Fifth Avenue, Hillary and her ilk would chuckle. They would step over your bloody corpse with a smirk on their faces, barely able to contain the laughter. Hillary speaks of so-called deprogramming, implying that the MAGA cultists, as she calls them, have been programmed and are incapable of individual thought, that they are just following a script that has been burned into their heads by Donald Trump. And in the case of some people, is this true? Sure. Yeah, there are some. There are NPCs on all sides, I assure you. But the fact that these people are NPCs, that is not what offends her. What offends her is the program, the script that they are following. And let's be clear, her definition of NPCs, even though she wouldn't use that term, is not really an honest one. Not everyone who she would consider to be programmed, a MAGA cultist, is actually a programmed MAGA cultist. And furthermore, she would not recognize people who are programmed to follow her script, to worship at her throne. She would not consider them to be cultists or programmed. The premise here is that people who are capable of individual rational thought would of course come to the same conclusions as her. And therefore, if you do not come to those same conclusions, well then obviously you've been manipulated by disinformation and malinformation, even worse. And so her rhetoric here is clearly in line with the existing deep state programming that has been airing on our televisions and on the internet and radio for many years now. And as we've seen in the wake of January 6th, and even before that, I believe, yes, before that, with the Whitmer hoax, the regime is very willing at this point to use every means at its disposal to do away with even mainstream opposition. It used to be that only people on the fringes, and I mean extreme fringe, people who were nowhere near, and I'm not saying that this is right. I'm just saying that you could at least generally not be afraid of political persecution if you were someone who was just supporting one of the two major party candidates, because that's always been the scam. It's like, well, we have the illusion of choice because, look, you've got two choices. And it's like, well, the people that they were worried about were folks who were kind of outside of that. And that was neither a necessary nor that was never a sufficient condition for being considered, a subversive by the regime, but it was usually a necessary condition. And so if you were within the two-party paradigm, you were generally safe. No longer. Now it's really the entirety of the Republican voter base, much more so than the Republican political class. Much of them are still considered allies of the regime because they've always been part of the regime, but it's that the Republican political class has lost control of its own base. They've disappointed their voters for too long, and so the jig is up. And the voters no longer respect the Republican political class. And that is why they must be deprogrammed, as Hillary says. This is going well beyond these, the so-called basket of deplorables. That's back when she thought that the deplorables, as she called them, were just a small handful of people. Now she recognizes that the entirety of the opposition base is made up of enemies of the state. And so one by one, these people must be isolated, and they must be re-educated. They must be made into good servants of the regime. So with that said, I hope I am not near the top of the list, so that I will be able to continue commentating on the decline of American individuality and the rise of authoritarianism. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.